Hey guys, Mr. Daldis here with the Chapter 10, Section 5 reading. This is the last section in Chapter 10. The Ottoman and Safavid Empires. While the Mughals ruled India, two other dynasties, the Ottomans and the Safavids, dominated the Middle East and parts of Eastern Europe. All three empires owed much of their success to new weapons that changed warfare. Cannons, and later muskets, gave greater firepower to ordinary foot soldiers, thus reducing the importance of mounted warriors. The new military technology helped the Ottomans and Safavids create strong central governments. As a result, this period from about 1450 to 1650 is sometimes called the Age of the Gunpowder Empires. The Ottoman Empire expands. Like the earlier Seljuks, the Ottomans were a Turkish-speaking nomadic people who migrated from Central Asia into northwestern Asia Minor. In the 1300s, they spread across Asia Minor and into Eastern Europe's Balkan Peninsula. Constantinople falls to the Ottomans. Ottoman expansion threatened the crumbling Byzantine Empire. After several failed attempts to capture Constantinople, Mehmet II finally succeeded in 1453. In a surprise move, the Ottomans hauled ships over land and launched them into the harbor outside Constantinople. After a nearly 2-month siege, Ottoman cannons finally blasted gaps in the great defensive walls of the city, and it became the new capital of the Ottoman Empire. From Constantinople, renamed Istanbul, the Ottoman Turks continued their conquest for the next 200 years. Suleiman the Magnificent. The Ottoman Empire enjoyed a golden age under the Sultan Suleiman, who ruled from 1520 to 1566. His people called him the Lawgiver, while Europeans called him Suleiman the Magnificent. A brilliant general, Suleiman modernized the army and conquered many new lands. He extended Ottoman rule eastward into the Middle East and also into Kurdistan and Georgia in the Caucasus Mountain region. In the west, Suleiman advanced deeper into Europe through diplomacy and warfare. In 1529, his army besieged the Austrian city of Vienna, sending fear through Western Europe. Although they failed to take Vienna, the Ottomans ruled the largest, most powerful empire in both Europe and the Middle East for centuries. At its height, the empire stretched from Hungary to Arabia and Mesopotamia and across northern Africa. Suleiman felt justified in claiming to be the rightful heir of the Abbasids and the caliph of all Muslims. To the title of emperor, he added the symbolic name, the protector of the sacred places, which are Mecca and Medina. Ottoman culture. Suleiman was a wise and capable ruler. He strengthened the government of the rapidly growing empire and improved its system of justice. As sultans, Suleiman had absolute power, but he ruled with the help of a grand vizier and a council. A huge bureaucracy supervised the business of government, and the powerful military kept the peace. Ottoman law was based on the Sharia, supplemented by royal edicts. Government officials worked closely with religious scholars who interpreted the law. Society is organized into classes. Ottoman society was divided into classes, each with its appointed role. At the top were men of the sword, soldiers who guarded the sultan and defended the state, and men of the pen, scientists, lawyers, judges, and poets. Below them were men of negotiation, such as merchants, tax collectors, and artisans who carried out trade and production. Finally, there were the men of husbandry, or farmers and herders who produced food for the community. The Ottomans ruled diverse peoples of many religions. The men of the sword and men of the pen were almost all Muslims, but the other classes included non-Muslims. The people were organized into millets, or religious communities. These included Muslims, Greek Christians, Armenian Christians, and Jews. Each millet had its own leaders who were responsible for education and some legal matters. The Jewish millets included many Jews who had been expelled from Spain in 1492. They brought international banking connections with them, plus a new technology for making cloth that helped Ottoman Empire's finance its expansion. Janissaries, the elite force. Like earlier Muslim empires, the Ottomans recruited officers for the army and government from among the huge populations of conquered peoples in their empire. The Ottomans levied a tax on Christian families in the Balkans, requiring them to turn over their young sons for government service. The boys were converted to Islam and put into religious military training at a palace school. The best soldiers won a prized place in the Janissaries, the elite force of the Ottoman Empire. The brightest students received special education to become government officials. They might serve as judges, poets, or even grand vizier. Like the boys, non-Muslim girls from Eastern Europe served as slaves in wealthy Muslim households. There, they might be accepted as members of the household. Some of the enslaved girls were freed after the death of their masters. Literature and the arts. The arts blossomed under Suleiman. Ottoman poets adapted Persian and Arab models to produce works in Turkish. Influenced by Persian artistic styles, Ottoman painters produced detailed miniatures and illuminated manuscripts. The royal architect Sinan, a Janissary military engineer, designed hundreds of mosques and palaces. He compared his most famous building, the Selimiye Mosque at Edirne, to the greatest church of the Byzantine Empire. With God's help and the Sultan's mercy, Sinan wrote, I have succeeded in building a dome for the mosque which is greater in diameter and height than that of the Hagia Sophia. Decline of the Ottomans. After Suleiman's death in 1566, the Ottoman Empire began a slow decline. Suleiman had killed two of his most able sons because he suspected them of treason. His son and successor, Selim II, left most of the governing to his ministers, and government bureaucracy became corrupt. By the 1700s, European advances in both commerce and military technology were leaving the Ottomans behind. Russia and other European powers captured Ottoman lands, while local rulers in North Africa and elsewhere broke away from Ottoman control. Able sultans tried to revive Ottoman power with limited success. The Safavid Empire. In the early 1500s, the Safavid dynasty had united an empire in Persia, present-day Iran. Sandwiched between two expansionist powers, Mughal India and the Ottoman Empire, the Safavids often engaged in warfare. Religion played a role in the conflict. The Safavids were Shiite Muslims who enforced their beliefs in their empire. The Ottomans were Sunni Muslims who despised the Shiites as heretics. Abbas the Great. The Safavid king was called the Shah. The best known, Shah Abbas the Great, revived that glory of ancient Persia. From 1588 to 1629, he centralized the government and created a powerful military force modeled on the Ottoman Janissaries. Abbas used a mixture of force and diplomacy against the Ottomans. He also sought alliances with European states that had reason to fear Ottoman power. To strengthen the economy, Abbas reduced taxes on farmers and herders and encouraged the growth of industry. Unlike earlier Safavids, Abbas tolerated non-Muslims and valued their economic contributions. He built a new capital at Isfahan, which became a center of the international silk trade. Armenians controlled the trade, so Abbas bought thousands of Armenians to Isfahan. He had a settlement built for these Christians just outside the capital, where they governed themselves. The Safavid Empire declines. Safavid glory slowly faded after the death of Shah Abbas and under continuing pressure from the Ottoman armies. Shiite scholars also challenged the authority of the Shah by stressing their own authority to interpret law and determine government policy. They encouraged persecution of religious minorities, pushing Sunni Afghans to rebel. The rebels defeated imperial armies, captured Isfahan, and forced the last Safavid ruler to abdicate in 1722. In the late 1700s, a new dynasty, the Qajars, won control of Iran. They made Tehran their capital and ruled until 1925. Still, the Safavids left a lasting legacy. They established Shi'ism firmly in Iran and gave Persians a strong sense of their own identity. That's the end of Section 5. Thanks for listening.